my friends. This is Chad Calek, and welcome back to the Uncrowded Room podcast for episode number 42, in which we are going to talk about the unfortunate passing of Lorraine Warren. If there was ever such a thing as a legend, Lorraine is it. For those that are unfamiliar with the paranormal field, what they don't know is that we all lost a legend, one of a kind. Her and Ed revolutionized a field that everybody believed in, but science claimed did not exist. Whenever you're the first one through the door, the saying is the first ones always get bloody. And early on in their career, that happened, of course. Everybody called Ed and Lorraine liars, snake oil salesmen, thieves. They accused them of every horrible thing in the world. And what I can tell you is if you ever spent 5 minutes with Lorraine, you would know that is just impossible. Lorraine is probably the kindest human being on planet Earth that I had ever met. In a 5-minute conversation, she would call you honey 10 times. She was genuinely concerned with how you were doing every time she saw you. She had an incredible memory for details of things that you would never believe that she could possibly remember from your last encounter with her. And she spent the vast majority of her life helping others. And I just need to stress that, She spent the vast majority of her life helping people who were scared. People that nobody believed. People in terror that was only compounded by the fact that loved and trusted ones would call them crazy on top of it. Lorraine and Ed were the only ones that would knock on the door and say, I'm going to believe you. And then when Ed passed away, I think everybody wondered, will Lorraine continue on? And boy, did she. She didn't skip a beat. She was consistently on the road, consistently going to houses, consistently traveling. I have never seen such energy in a woman of her age, ever. Ever. So I hope everybody realizes that we lost a legend. Unfortunately, because Lorraine wasn't a mindless self-promoter, she wasn't out there trying to make the world about her. I feel like the world at large doesn't recognize her as the legend that she was. I mean, there should be 5 documentaries about this woman, and there's not one. And I think that says a lot for her focus and what she cared about the most. Lorraine genuinely loved people. She loved people. Her energy was just always so fun. She was funny. She was a jokester who loved a great joke. There was never a time that I wasn't around Lorraine that, no matter how difficult the case was, that she didn't have me laughing by the end of the day. That was just an incredible thing that she brought to the world. And I guess overall, before I share a few personal stories with you, mourning It's a necessary selfishness. There's definitely a piece of my heart that is like, oh man, like Lorraine's gone. And I think it's because I realize how profoundly less interesting the world is without Lorraine. And that hurts. I want to hear that Lorraine was on a crazy new case that all these scientists are trying to figure out. I want to hear these stories that she went to, UCLA, or I think it was USC, one of the two, and did these tests of psychic ability and just was off the charts with her ability. She was that person. She's who brought that magic to the world along with Ed. And when Ed was gone, she continued bringing that magic to the world. And that's what I mean by the world is less interesting without her. Because we now have less magic to explore. And at the end of the day, to me, the only thing that holds any real value in this world are the substance of memories. And if you've ever experienced a paranormal event, whether it's a positive event or a negative event or just something incredible that happened that shouldn't happen, like those are the things that make memories that you remember in your final days. And Lorraine delivered so many events, so many cases, and so many incredible things that made everybody question the world, that made everybody wonder, is there more to this than just nuts and bolts? Is this more than just ones and twos? Is there a situation where 2 + 2 could maybe equal 5? I mean, she just brought magic to the world. So as far as her psychic ability, one of the best stories I could tell you, which blew my mind because it's very well noted publicly that I am often distrusting of psychics, not because I disbelieve that psychic ability is possible. It's simply because it's the most abused area of the paranormal field, and it's so easy to manipulate people. So when it comes to psychics, I was always far more interested to hang out with them when they weren't a part of an event, or they weren't a part of a show, or they weren't trying to do a cold room read or something. Like in their normal life, if I go to lunch with a psychic, can he tell me what's going to happen in the room? Like stuff like that. Like that's what I wanted to know. So when we were filming the Darkness Falls pilot, which was actually the pilot that would later become the Ghost Prophecies, and we actually used that scenario, a fear test, for the Darkness Falls episode of Paranormal State. On that filming of that episode, Lorraine was flown in. And what was really interesting is that Joe Ansley had never met Lorraine. But like anybody who's an investigator, he grew up his whole life reading about her. He knew all the history of all the cases, and he's blown away. Like Lorraine Warren is coming. Oh my God! Like the grandmother of the paranormal. She's going to be showing up, and he's truly excited to see her. But Joe is also terrified of the West Virginia State Penitentiary. And he didn't want to do this kind of premise because they were fear tests. We were going to put ourselves through things and intentionally try to stress ourselves out and find out, where is our level of fear? How far can we go before we bail? Joe did not want to do this. He just did not want to do this. He was not comfortable with the West Virginia State Penitentiary. He said he felt all kinds of negative energy, especially back towards these cells that he was hanging out. He felt like there was satanic stuff there. There was all kinds of stuff that just freaked Joe out. And he was terrified. So when Lorraine was coming, it offered him kind of a mental escape because he could focus on the fact that he would soon be meeting the legend, Lorraine Warren. So Lorraine shows up, and she's never met Joe. She does not know him. And she comes around the door, and I've met her once before, and she starts telling me this story about how on the way to the West Virginia State Penitentiary, she saw 3 shadow people and what were 2 black shadow wolves just walking across the street. Now, I've never experienced this. I know shadow people exist. I've never filmed them out in the open walking around. It's very clear to me that I personally don't know what she's talking about. I've never experienced it. But again, Lorraine does not strike me in any capacity as a liar. So I just kind of take it for what it's worth. You know, Lorraine's been doing this a hell of a long time, more than I have. Someone told me she had done over 3,000 cases or something like that. Crazy number. So I just take her for her word. And she's very sweet in her welcoming. And she asked me, where we're going to be filming most of today's episode. And she is not filming that day, or wasn't scheduled to. She was just coming down to check it out because she just arrived. So I take her down through this main door to where everybody's standing around, and Joe's there. And again, nobody has talked to her about Joe. She doesn't know Joe. Nothing. So I take it upon myself to introduce him. And she comes to the door, and I go, Lorraine, I go, this is my good friend. He's like my little bro, Joey. I just want to introduce you. And she looks at him and she goes, oh, honey, what are you doing here? And he goes, what? And she goes, this place is not for you, honey. Please don't do this. The fear that came over Joe's face was one of the funniest things I have ever seen. He was absolutely terrified. He just looked at me like, dude, see, I told you, man. I told you. Oh my God. So it just blew my mind because she had no idea he was terrified of the place. She had no idea that he didn't want to do, the premise that we had set up. She had no idea of anything. And somehow she just picked this out now. We went on to calm Joey down. And truth be told, we went really easy on Joe. We just knew that his fear level was not very far. The stuff we gave him to do was really easy. And we made sure, because of her warning, that we got him in and out pretty quickly. And we've never released this pilot, but if you saw it, Joey's barely in it for that reason. So, but that was an incredible moment. It was an incredible moment for me. And one of the first times where I was like, Lorraine's onto something. Lorraine, she's onto something. Because she picked that up right away. And I think the other thing about Lorraine that I always found fascinating was her ability to see like the big picture. When she joined my family's case, the whole time that I'm there, I'm thinking that we're all there for one reason: to get my mother help. If she needs psychological help or spiritual help, whatever it is, we need to identify it and get her help. Because as everybody had seen, for years, she was claiming that things were taking her over and speaking through her. And these horrific events would follow with her. So when we were all standing outside in the American Ghost Hunter documentary, and we're talking about who is going to go inside and address whatever this potential being is that's inside of her, it's discussed that, maybe Ryan should do it. And I'm thinking that's a bad idea because my dad loves my mom. And if he does something that in any way ends up being, physical and hurting her, so my dad out of natural reaction is going to attack. And any man would that's, been with someone for that long. And I'm thinking I'm not putting Lorraine in a position where she has to deal with the potential for violence. So I knew the answer. And then Lorraine said, "You have to do it." Which, see, my response is, "Lorraine, that's my mother." This was just my worst nightmare. I truly went back there to do everything in my power to help her. But Lorraine saw that there was just a bigger picture. What Lorraine saw is that more than my mother needed help. Starting with me. If I was ever going to have a life, I had to leave that one behind at some point. If my father was ever going to experience happiness, his wife would need help. And it goes without saying that, my mother needed help. So I think Lorraine was looking for a way to help as many people as possible. And I think that came from her many, many years of walking into these cases and realizing nothing when it comes to demonic or negative haunting cases. Nothing starts, stops, and ends with one person. She knew it was going to be a tough, tough road, and she was trying to help as many people as she could. And it was that genius that comes from an experience that nobody else has on planet Earth. Nobody else on planet Earth other than Lorraine. And in closing, I just want to share with you guys two things about Lorraine that forever inspired me and changed me. First and foremost, Lorraine is the definition of devout. And that is a powerful thing to be. It is a really powerful thing to be. And when you see it in person, when you see someone that is so committed to their beliefs that they are unshakable, it is just powerful because most of us aren't, including me. My thoughts go back and forth all the time with religion. It's a battle that's been going on inside of me, and I probably always will be. And yeah, sometimes it's social. Yeah, you don't want to say certain things at times for being judged. You don't want to sound like a know-it-all when you do feel like you got something figured out. And when you don't have something figured out, you don't want to offend anybody. Lorraine was devout. Lorraine had her beliefs. She did not judge you if you didn't believe in her. She was accepting. I had a wonderful conversation with her at my parents' house. It was fairly brief, but it was super important. We were talking about, my spiritual beliefs and who I am. And she was able to identify some very major differences in her belief system and mine. And after I got done explaining it to her, I said, "So, is this a part of the conversation where you tell me I'm a heathen? And I said it jokingly. And she goes, oh, honey, no. This is the part of the conversation where I tell you to keep traveling the road that you're on. Because she knew for some people, you just find that thing that you can sink your teeth into religiously, spiritually, that you know. And for some people, it just takes a long time. And you can't force someone into their beliefs. You can't walk them to a belief system. All you can do is just support the person and hope the best for them. And it just inspired me that she could go into so many situations around the world, so many cases, being a devout Catholic and not care at all what the person's belief system is. Because above all of that, she was a human being who cared about people. And it wasn't her job to judge them and sort them out. I just remember thinking, what a great way to carry yourself. What a great way to carry yourself. Be proud of who you are and have nothing but hope and admiration for anybody that doesn't follow your belief system. That's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. And the last thing that I will say is I get asked this question more than probably any other question when it comes to fellow investigators that I've worked with. People always ask me, so who's the bravest investigator that you've ever worked with? And I've worked with them all, man. I have been on ghost hunts with everyone you can think of. Nobody comes close to the bravery of Lorraine Warren. I have never seen her flinch, bat an eye, have a pause or a hesitation. She is always head first. She has so much belief in her spiritual ability, her psychic ability. She has so much belief that God will do what's right. She has so much belief that her bravery is like a sword. And it changes a case. I'm telling you, I have been on cases where the entire vibe, it goes from being normal, where the house feels totally normal. And then the rain shows up and it just feels like chaos is going on. Almost like the spirits are unsettled, like they're freaking out because Lorraine showed up. I am not kidding you. I have felt that on a number of occasions with her. She was the bravest that I've ever known. She was the bravest. In my lifetime, I got to work with a legend. And I am better for it. And when it comes to Lorraine right now, I truly believe she is laughing and smiling with Red, who she loved so much and spoke about so often. If there was one person that was not afraid of going to the other side, it was Lorraine Warren. So Lorraine, I love you. Thank you for everything. Tell Ed hello from me. I wish I could have met him, but never had the opportunity. But he has an incredible wife. Thank you all for listening to episode number 42 of the In a Crowded Room podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with more. All the best.